Welcome to the Star Chamber. I'm Ryan Swayze, a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel and the founder and president of the Walk the Talk Foundation, a nonprofit that advocates for and advises currently serving and former military service members going through the arduous journey of administrative processes and investigations in our government.
And I am Francesca Graham, a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel and the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Advisor for the Walk the Talk Foundation. For all our returning guests, welcome back. And for our new listeners, thank you for tuning in. Before we begin this week's topic, please do not forget to hit that subscribe button, check out our Walk the Talk Foundation website, and hit that donate button if you think we're doing a good job. Also, check out our newsletter, the DoD Times Redacted, on all the socials, including LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. Links in the description. All right, Star Chamber listeners, let's get started.
Well, welcome back to part 2 of our two-part series on the Defense Attaché service scandal of 2019 to 2022. Last episode, we recounted events from 2019 up through the summer of 2021, and we left off at the point of late summer. I had since departed a year prior, and Chad, our guest, Lieutenant Colonel Chad Brooks, had been recalled to D.C. and lambasted for a swath of outlandish accusations that were groundless, and then returned to Rome, where he began his, what he called, campaign plan, targeting the retribution, retaliation, and reprisal happening not only to himself, but to others. And as he was reaching out to the House and Senate Intel committees in that summer, a turn of events occurred which no one could have anticipated: the Afghanistan evacuation of August of 2021. What followed then can only be labeled, I say, as disgusting. Let's hear how those events played out from the man and person who is at the center of it all, Chad. But before we start, Cheska with our disclaimer.
So, before we get started, the opinions and views expressed by guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not represent the official policies, positions, or endorsements of the United States Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or any other government entity. This discussion is intended for informational purposes only and should not be construed as reflecting the official stance of any military or governmental organization. What do we say, Ryan?
Suck it, Poindexters.
Suck it, Poindexters.
Please.
Please. All right, so let's get started. I'm excited.
So where we last left off, we had begun basically our battle campaign plan in order to address some of the issues that we were seeing in the Defense Attaché service, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and also address a lot of the shortcomings of our avenues of redress, specifically chain of command and the Inspector General. At the end of the last episode, we alluded to how we began to get some traction in the House Intel Committee, Senate Intel Committee, and in the press. However, there was a major event before that played out, which bears discussion now, and that is the agency's interference and or meddling of the Afghanistan evacuation operation of August of 2021.
Afghanistan happened in August, end of July, August 2021, right?
Mm-hmm.
My reputation is in shambles. The outgoing SDO-DAT, who was, by all accounts, problematic. The senior defense official, Defense Attaché, essentially the boss of Defense Attaché Office Rome, he has left. And we're awaiting his replacement to come in. So there's a vacuum, a leadership vacuum in the office, which isn't that big of a deal because attachés are largely independent operators anyway, loosely organized, but doing a lot of service-specific, own initiative stuff. But when Afghanistan starts to happen, my name has been tarnished. But as a former AFPAC hand, I know more about Afghanistan than probably 99% of the DoD, and probably even to more fine point percentages than that. And we start to engage in that mission because there are certain diplomatic things that we had to quarterback vis-a-vis our, relationship with Italy. So we engaged in that mission, and it became very difficult because as I was trying to do things, I was not being treated the same way that a normal Marine lieutenant colonel would be treated, at least in the joint world in DAO Rome. Luckily enough, Marine Corps intelligence activity was still treating me like a lieutenant colonel of Marines. So that happened, and I had decided with a colleague of ours in DAO Rome that we needed to be in contact with the Marine task force that was newly landed in Kabul. And again, fighting that reputational harm that had been done during that 2 weeks was palpable for me. Not only was that palpable, but then from inside of DIA, I had colleagues telling me that, hey, they're trying to use this against you as part of the character assassination campaign.
You working the Afghanistan evacuation, they were trying to use that against you?
100%. Yep,
Okay.
100%.
How? In what way?
At least what I was told was that the beef that they were trying to make is that I was using Intel activity appropriated funds for non-Intel purposes,
I
which,
gotcha. Okay.
I quantify that,
Yeah.
I
Okay. All
mean,
right. Noted. Yeah.
yeah, so, and that really all gets debunked later on as we're going through things and setting up that operation. My interpreter's family was still over there, mom, two brothers, two sisters. I'd been working to get them out for some time already on humanitarian parole visas. So I had worked with the country team, like, hey, look, if I can work to get these guys out, and I can get them here to Italy, can we process them through the consulate here in Rome? And they're like, "Yep, Chad, get your people out. We'll figure it out, man. Like, we'll figure it out." And I've got nothing but great things to say about the Department of State, going through that whole evacuation. I mean, the stuff that they were, I mean, they moved mountains. They were great. And as we developed policy and set up the lily pad operation down in Sigonella, Nassig in Sicily, getting my interpreter's family out and getting them to me, literally had the Italians bring them to me in Rome. I picked them up from the airport.
And I remember you recounting the events of this evacuation here. You were working some serious hours with a colleague doing the digital Dunkirk, essentially helping out with that. And then you tell me something I will never forget as well, that one of the officers, a senior ranking officer in the office, walks into your office and tells you to stop. Tell me about that day and how that played out.
Yeah, I'll tell you, that was rough. And I give a brief about this now. I've given it at the Naval War College, Naval Justice School
Mhm.
a number of times now, and how the difficult positions that you're going to be put in during a large non-combatant evacuation operation, or a NEO as we call them. So I was back there and I was specifically working, getting a family into the East Gate. It was a family that had been passed to me by the former Department of Treasury attaché, who ultimately sent me, like, no kidding, the Secretary of the Treasury's approved list of people to get out of Afghanistan. The Marines were having a hard time getting this family, who I was told in no uncertain terms will be killed by the Taliban if the Taliban find out who they are. I was back in the hallway on the cell phone because I had to draft up a memo. The Marines asked me to put something on, like, DoD letterhead, that said that this family was to be led on to H. Khair, Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul. And so I had done this. So I printed up the memo, signed it. I'm taking a picture of it with my cell phone. I'm in the back staircase, and this individual comes back to me and, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey guys, I can't, I can't do that, sir. What do you mean you can't do that? I've told you, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, I've got this family. The Taliban have them. I've literally ordered a Marine lieutenant not to let this family out of their sight. But yeah, this guy tried to tell me, he was like, the exact language that I was told is, you are to get out of the business of getting people out of Afghanistan.
Let me stop you right there, because this bears repeating for anybody who's just checking back into the show. You are positioned in Rome in the embassy. and you are telephonically and electronically managing assistance for the Afghanistan evacuation operation, both of Americans as well as our Afghan interpreters and their families. And in walks an American military officer to the stairwell you were operating out of and orders you not once, but twice to cease and desist helping that operation. That is accurate as I have it understood correctly.
Spot on. And
Where in the hell does an order like that come from?
I was told that from the country team inside of DIA, they were pushing the word to shut down what we were doing to get people out of Afghanistan. I know for a fact that there were people who pushed back against that inside of DIA that were really, had our backs.
That's good. So it's not everybody's a traitor.
I wouldn't use the word traitor, treachery, or there's very specific legal definitions of that. But what I do coin this as is an unlawful order. And so as time went on, we actually began to get orders from the director of operations, then Major General Schmidt, inside of DIA, asking us to get people out of Afghanistan for DIA. So before we're being told one thing, later we're getting told another. It was very clear that we were just trying to do the best that we could do in the situation to, follow the intent of hire to get people out of Afghanistan. Look, the Taliban were taking these people. If you got turned away from the gate, a lot of these people got walked around the corner and got two in the back of the head. And I knew that this family was specifically being sought after by the Taliban, as told to me, by very senior, people in the U.S. government, formerly in the U.S. government. And I'm doing all I can, right? And so I had to just say, hey, look, I want to do what you're asking me to do, what you're telling me to do, and I can get to that, but I can't get to that for a few hours until I get this family out. Okay? Again, I'm working with the country team. They've asked me to do this. And leadership in DAO Rome are using phrases toward me like, I was told, you're just off the reservation. You don't even know how far off the reservation you are.
Good Lord.
But these were things, and again, I don't know if I wasn't a judge advocate that I wouldn't have been able to parse through, that and still do the right thing. Again, these were things that were very, difficult. I mean, you want to talk about stress? You want to talk about stress? Yeah.
Well, on 9 out of 10 attaches, that tactic works because of two things. Number one, the attaché isn't a judge advocate, doesn't know the rules and the law. Number two, they believe the Defense Intelligence Agency, the entity in fact off the reservation when it comes to the law and rules of the country, and we can state that as fact. In the intelligence community, I think is specifically susceptible to this. They're this autonomous bubble, right? And that's why the importance of whistleblowers and IGs is especially pronounced in the intelligence community because, number one, you've got a lot of classification, you've got a lot of deference, operational and tactical deference given to the community because of that sensitive mission and sensitivity of the information. It's very important to have a healthy whistleblower system because when it fails, the ramifications are much more pronounced. It's not like your line of the Air Force, like, okay, somebody's career was ruined. That's bad. Okay. But in the intelligence community, you have Snowdens. You have very critical information leak. You have people die when these things don't happen. And here's the link. We're going to kind of draw this from December 2019 to August 2021 in the timeline. I report the wrongdoings being carried out by Defense Attaché service managers. They aren't addressed, they aren't rectified, and lo and behold, a year and a half later, according to multiple witness accounts, they are the ones who order you, by extension, to cease and desist assisting the Afghanistan evacuation operation. And there is the link. That could have been curbed had there been a functioning inspector general chain of command avenue of redress, and it's not. And that's where lives were endangered without hyperbole.
100%. And it was, I mean, there was so much more, that that happened during that time that was so significant that we were able to do that. I mean, it saved people's lives. Like, I mean, what we were doing literally saved people's lives. And I'm not just saying that. Like, I mean, the task force commander literally sent me an email saying that, Chad, you saved people's lives. But when I got the word that that was happening, I had had enough. I had had enough, and I wasn't going to let that get in the way of that operation. And so I went up the Marine Corps chain of command and popped a Red Star cluster and said, "Hey, gentlemen, I'm just letting you know that this is what I'm being told is happening, and that's like, give me some top cover here."
You and your colleague out there did a hell of a lot of work and saved a lot of lives, period, dot. While,
Yeah.
and this is the sick irony, perhaps, while members in the DIA were trying to stop it. I mean, it baffles the mind. But in April 2022, you speak to Major General Michelle Schmidt, who's at the time the director of operations of the agency, about that event in August 2021, the evacuation operation, the attempted interference thereof. In parallel, months later, I request via my representative, Rob Whitman, the results of that report and investigation. I'm going to read to you what the Defense Intelligence Agency wrote in September of 2023. So this is 19 months after I've requested via Freedom of Information Act and my representative a follow-up as to what played out, not only in the Afghanistan evacuation operation, but as well as the internal investigation that followed in April 2022. Here's what they wrote. Dear Representative Whitman, thank you for your inquiry. The DIA Directorate of Operations, DO, conducted 2 administrative investigations related to the Defense Attaché service. The recommendations that stem from those investigations are complete. As appropriate, officers were counseled and received remedial training to ensure future adherence to DoD and DIA policies and procedures. End quote.
Counseled.
Counseled. What do you think about that, Chad?
Yeah, I counseled what? Like, don't get in the way of saving people's lives. I mean, what do you?
Well, I don't know about you, my friend, but I didn't accept that answer. So I contacted Representative Whitman's defense staffer, and as I was in Virginia and a one-party consent state, here is what he had to say.
Yeah, as far as the response that we got from the DoD on the whistleblower complaint of the member of the DIA being told to stand down and not assist with the evacuation. So there has to be a recognition by all of us, right? Whether it be the congressman, whether it be we as his staff, and then also those who are reaching out to our office for assistance, that there are bounds to even a congressman's ability to influence and they can't do everything that they might want to do, right? So, Congressman Whitman cannot open an investigation, right? Because because we're displeased with the DoD's response to the letter that we sent, right? We can't order the military to open an investigation, right? We just don't have that power, right? So I think I have to be honest with you, and we all have to be honest with each other in the limitations to the powers of Congressman Whitman and others, right? So we took the whistleblower complaint seriously that you brought to our attention, right? We sent the letter on your behalf. The response that we received, it has to be sufficient for us. I'm not saying that it's the best answer, it's the right answer, it's the answer that I was hoping for, or that I would have given if I was in the situation replying to the letter, right? I don't know all of the facts at that level, but as an office as a staff member for a congressman, we have to take a response like that and accept it for what it is, that the DoD looked into it, that officers were counseled, right?
All right, so there you have it. Congressional oversight at its finest.
Well, yeah, and I will, I'll take a little bit of issue with that. They've got subpoena power. I mean, they can do a lot more stuff when they really want to, right? But
yes, yeah, and they have.
Yeah, the way that I explain this when I give the brief is I say, look, as military officers, we're acting in really kind of one of three areas, right? We're acting where we're specifically ordered to do something, right? We've been given a mission. We're in a realm where we've been specifically told we can't do something. Think like UCMJ, can't do stuff. And then there is this vast gray area in between where it's, hey, we haven't been told not to, we haven't been told to do it. There's nothing prohibiting me from doing this. Okay, I'm going to take the initiative here and do the right thing for the right reason, knowing what my higher authority, is engaged in, which was this massive NEO operation to get the right people out of Afghanistan, right?
Mhm.
And so I was, just not, I wasn't going to hold up for that.
You continue with the mission, you save a lot of people, you're lauded by many. Now we're working full bore, you and I in concert,
Yep.
congressional, House Intel Committee, Senate Intel Committee, and now the nuclear option, which I labeled as the nuclear option because for me it was, and that's to go public.
Yeah.
And so you have some serendipitous connections, and you begin that in the fall of 21.
Yeah, and we were just on the road to, hey, like obviously we are not going to be made whole, like personally, even though that's what the IG system is set up for. I'd already accepted, we're not going to, there's not going to be any justice come to us, but hey, we can make this thing better for other people, hopefully, right? So yeah, like the public affairs side of things, airing it out was the next step. And I was lucky enough to have a journalistic contact from my time in Afghanistan, and they were in a position to tell the story. And you were frankly courageous enough. I mean, you were still active duty, but you were courageous enough to be there in uniform and tell the story. And again, I tons of respect for that, Ryan. I mean, that takes a lot of gumption, a lot of moxie. You had forwarded me one thing that was relevant in my role as the Intel Oversight Officer of DAO Rome, and that was that you had received information from a witness that said operations coordinators all over the DAO were told by their civilian leadership to collect and report on line attaches around the DAS all over the world, right?
Yes, let's stop that right there because that was an important piece of information that I received. So, as part of the 70 or so witness statements that I had collected over this past year, one of them was from an operations coordinator. They're typically enlisted or a warrant officer. They are sent out to each attaché office as basically running the staff. They're not in charge, they're not in command, they're just number two in the office, just subordinate to the defense attaché, but they have no command authority, what have you. And the witness statement said that a group, so the graduating class, if you will, of these operations coordinators were called to a meeting by one of the geographic division leads within the attaché service and told, quote, "You work for me and you are to collect and report on attaché activities to me," thereby doing two things. I allege violating an executive order that prohibits U.S. persons reporting on U.S. persons. But you can say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, it usurps the chain of command and the sanctity thereof because they are circumventing the defense attaché, the boss of each office.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll never forget it when you told me about that, Ryan. My former prosecutor, lawyer, bells and whistles are going off. To me, that was a clear violation of EO 12333. Like you said, it's undermining the military chain of command in an illegal fashion. And also, in a personal way, it had explained what had happened to me. It had
Yeah.
explained how, there was like this kind of list of, ways that I had been a problem in DAO Rome on the long term is that they were keeping a file on me. And
Mhm.
so with
Yeah.
my intelligence oversight officer hat on, I reported a questionable intelligence activity up the appropriate chains of command and up to and including like the Office of General Counsel for DIA. The particular instruction at issue is clear that, hey, if this is alleging potentially criminal conduct on behalf of anybody, which this would, that needs to be forwarded to the Attorney General of the United States, which I recommended in my email be done.
Mhm.
And I also took steps to forward that to the SISI, the HIPSI, and to the Office of General Counsel for the Secretary of Defense. That went nowhere. Of course, I FOIA'd, Privacy Act requested all of my investigations.
And as luck would have it, a couple of days before we recorded this episode, you actually received, Chad, the results of the FOIA request that you filed in June of 2022, 3 years after DIA IG closed the investigation that you made a complaint concerning reprisal. So just a quick timeline for everyone. So in May of 2021, Chad made a complaint to the DIA IG saying that he was being reprised against. The DIA-IG took a full year to conduct that investigation to unsubstantiate his complaints, and he received notification in May of 2022 that all of his complaints were unsubstantiated. In June of 2022, he filed a FOIA request with the DIA-IG office to try to figure out what was actually going on with that complaint. Because, of course, for those of you who have been the subject of an investigation or been a complainant for an investigation, you will not actually have any details on these administrative investigations until you file a FOIA or a Privacy Act request, which you'll receive, as in Chad's case, 3 years later. So, Chad, tell us a little bit about, first of all, what were the actual complaints that you made, and then how did DIA swing the mental cheetah flips to unsubstantiate all of them and make you look like you are the crazy one, also known as gaslighting 101.
Oh, sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had made multiple complaints of reprisal for canking my second diplomatic assignment to Bogota, Colombia.
Mhm.
Reprisal for the Velvet Dagger fitness report that I got for the period that I had become a whistleblower. Fraud, waste, and abuse of government funds for ordering me back to Washington, D.C. when they could have just as easily hopped me on a classified, communications line if they needed that, or some
Mhm.
other form of VTC. They made me travel during COVID. I got really sick when I was on the road. So I just got this investigation back, heavily redacted, I will say, as a result of the inquiry that I submitted, in June of 2022. And so, yeah, they unsubstantiated everything, and I will say that they do some very interesting mental gymnastics to do
Mhm.
that. I will say the first thing that I notice that everything that is a result of an interview or anything else is taken in the light least favorable to me as the complainant.
Mm.
That there is absolutely no digging into the facts as alleged by DIA to justify their actions when they just don't make sense. They don't fit their own timeline.
Mhm.
They don't fit the documents that I provided to the
Because they're
IG.
not vetted. I mean, if it was something said slanderous about you and your character, that thing or those submissions are not vetted. It's the same thing that I saw in my case.
Yeah, and I'll say like a great concrete example of this, right, is they say that the what we allege are violations of EO 12333 collecting against US persons for nefarious purposes. They
Mhm.
say that these are valid personnel actions taken for rating and essentially evaluating personnel. Well, if that was the case, when I submitted a Privacy Act request for all of the records that DIA had on me, they should have been able to give me that file. I
Mhm.
saw that file. It had my name on it. Per the Privacy Act, that's supposed to be registered on the Federal Register as a system of records, and it must be maintained accurately. That's
Mhm.
what gives me the right, or any service member, so any attaché who would be, had these files against them. Ryan, guaranteed you had one as well. We would have the
100%.
right to ensure that those records are accurate. But here they're not, because they're not a declared system of records inside of DIA. And they just swipe that away. Like the IG doesn't even flag that off as something that is legally inconsistent with DIA's explanation of what happened, what took place. Another common theme is citing to regulations, but not quoting them. regulations that I can't obtain that are DIA internal regulations that purport to give
and or classified. Yeah.
to people, and that just from a legal standpoint, they don't make sense. The contention that they make don't make sense. The one order that they do cite that I can get is a Marine Corps order, and I've read through it, and it doesn't purport to stand for the proposition that they allege. Then glaringly absent was any reference to the attempted reprisal vis-a-vis my actions to get people out of Afghanistan. There's zero mention of that at all in this investigation, and it was definitely made part of it. I communicated that to the Inspector General's office.
So they were just silent about that altogether.
Silent. I mean, they didn't even touch it. No, and then the other thing was one of the cases of reprisal was the allegation that of the Velvet Dagger fitness report, which had a Marine third signer on it. I can tell from the investigation that he was interviewed, and the IG makes no mention of the fact that he had a motive to give me this reprisal fitness report, in that he had the entire attaché program taken away from him by then Major General Seeley, who is the director of intelligence for the Marine Corps. The day before he signed off on my fitness report, and in that email, Major General Seeley sent out to all Marine attachés worldwide, said, from today on, I will be the third signer for all Marine attaché fitness reports. And then this guy who just had the program taken away from him goes in and signs my fitness report anyway, downgrading me the day after. No mention of that in the investigation whatsoever. And that was something that I brought up as, motive. So a lot of glaring mistakes, a lot of glaring things. And, as you noted, we've talked about before, as a judge advocate, I see a lot of investigations. I've prosecuted the most complex criminal trials in Marine Corps history with Haditha and Hamdaniya. So I'm very familiar with quality investigations, and I can state without ambiguity that this is not it.
Yeah. Oh, look at my shocked face. What? Sounds shockingly familiar to, everyone's investigations on this podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of get to know.
Fulfill a foregone conclusion and done.
And done. But yeah, so that was a huge piece, and because that was the first time, and going back to the beginning and understanding what's happening, why it's happening, that was the first time for me that explained what had happened in Rome, was that it got flagged off for this covert, illegal reporting up the civilian chain of command, that I had become a problem to a point where I was recommending that the office, essentially telling the boss that the office needed to be investigated. And that's why I got recalled. It was that initial protected communications that I believe is why I was recalled. And subsequently, I've been told, by people later on that was exactly it.
Yeah, so a lot of things are happening in parallel now. We're getting a lot of traction. I'm working with the Wall Street Journal, the two journalists you had introduced me to. There are some individuals who are speaking to them offline, non-attributionally as well. That article gets slow rolled for a number of reasons, mostly at the editorial level. It eventually is published. What probably saved the institution in a weird turn of events was the article is published the day before Ukraine is invaded by Russia. So the story had about a day of sunlight before Ukraine kicked off, and everything was basically obfuscated, usurped by that story for the next 3 years. But we'll have the story linked in the description box. One of the most telling quotes, which is an anonymous quote, but to your point, Chad, you talk about usurping the chain of command, but also, and this is from the article, quote, as a defense attaché at a U.S. embassy in a foreign country, I should not have to spend a large portion of my time looking over my shoulder for someone nefarious from DIA. There are plenty of other foreign threats for me to worry about, end quote. A lot of this goes to how it might sound on the surface to be ticky-tack or palace intrigue type of stuff, but when your teammates are spying on you, literally, and you find out that the Defense Intelligence Agency has ordered them to do that, all trust in your team, of which is very small, and all these outstations with all these foreign threats, with all these counterintelligence threats, with all these other spying threats, etc. And all you have is your team of 7 to rely on, and now you can't even trust them. That destroys the mission.
Crushes it. Absolutely crushes it. Because you can't operate in an environment where you think that, where literally anybody could say in your office that you did something untoward and done, like hard done, right? Like you're going to get put on ice. So it's, why do you take initiative? What are you going to, you got to trust your teammates, especially out there, especially in those environments. Yeah, I mean, it's so telling to bring it home to, why is this a matter of urgency to be solved? And frankly, why did we keep going with it? All the way through up to the Intel Authorization Act of, what was it, 2022 or 2023? I think it was 2023.
The long story short of the next 6 months is that we work hard in the committees behind the scenes, you especially, Chad. I put my face in the Wall Street Journal so it could adorn many dartboards in DIA.
Literally.
Literally.
Yeah.
The press gets out. We have another colleague, former Defense Intelligence Agency colleague, work with Jackie Spear, who is sitting on the House Intel Committee. And after the Wall Street Journal comes out, she actually poses a question to General Barrier, the director at the time.
General Barrier, in my last 12 seconds, I will ask that you take this question for the record and provide me additional information later. The Wall Street Journal just did an article that was deeply troubling to me, and I think to my colleagues, about a toxic environment in DIA. A whistleblower came forward. There is egregious behavior going on. At another time, I would like you to provide us additional information about what you are doing to change that. I yield back.
And that was Representative Spear directing General Barrier to fix his agency, basically, and report back on how he's doing it, primarily because, and this is what we talked to at the beginning of the episode, something that started off so simple, really, in nature, that could have been solved so easily, had snowballed out of control to the point where now the director is answering to the House Intel Committee about how effed up his agency is and how he's going to fix it.
And I'd just like to highlight, so that exchange between Representative Spears and now retired Lieutenant General Barrier, March of 2022. So at the same time that he or his staff was figuring out how to respond to Representative Spear, in May of 2022, and Ryan found this out through a FOIA request, he was simultaneously bad-mouthing Ryan to officers at the Defense Intelligence Agency. So in May of 2022, and you can go onto our website at Walk the Talk Foundation to find these notes that were actually General Barrier's talking points from that Army all-call. And I wrote an article about it that we published in February 17th, 2024, after Ryan got the FOIA request back. And I'll just read just the first paragraph of that article. In May 2022, a mere 2 months after the U.S. Congress received 65 witness statements alleging 158 wrongdoings within the Defense Intelligence Agency, Defense Attaché Service, the then director of DIA, Lieutenant General retired Scott Barrier, briefed likely hundreds of Army personnel supporting the DIA that, quote, I don't think that that's a DAS issue writ large, or, quote, a DIA issue, unquote. Further, he told the Army soldiers that the person who brought the DIA DAS abuses to light was, quote, just an Air Force officer stationed at a, quote, far-flung platform that didn't get the evaluation he wanted, didn't get the assignment he wanted. He retired, and now he's just agitated about DIA and toxicity at DIA. Unquote.
I laugh, but it's so telling for so many reasons, because Number one, it's defamation. You know why? Because it's a lie. Because he had the 70 witness statements in his hand months prior to that and then attributed all to this one disgruntled Air Force officer. Total misrepresentation of the facts. But more telling is that this is the director. This is the person that sets the tone.
Yep.
He is the person that says, this is what will happen to you if you blow the whistle. Watch me publicly skewer him, the disgruntled Air Force officer, which is me, and anybody else who speaks ill of the institution. Another interesting turn of events, I took that to the Department of Defense Inspector General. I said, that is a chilling effect. I'm no lawyer, Chad is, but I argue that he has imparted a chilling effect on the entire agency and has de facto restricted anyone from ever reporting anything because he has just made a public example of what happens to whistleblowers. I thought it was a pretty good argument. The DODIG did not agree and unsubstantiated.
Yep. And when the DODIG contacted me as a Army officer that was at the Defense Intelligence Agency going through my reprisal and retaliation at that exact time period, and they said, hey, Lieutenant Colonel retired Swayze gave this complaint. You're an Army officer. What do you think about it? Well, it was absolutely a restriction, 100%. And they said, well, were you there in person and did you hear General Barry say, I'm like, no, but I have the record of him saying it. Well, but you weren't there, so you don't know. I was like, no, that's not how it works. Unsubstantiated, all unsubstantiated. So good. Thank you, DODIG.
So that all plays out, and the culmination of all this, or thereabouts, aside from the birth of the foundation, of which this was a big part of, was the passing of the fiscal year 2023 Intelligence Authorization Act, which Chad mentioned in the previous segment. That's a compendium to the National Defense Authorization Act, the public law, which is also the department's budget. And I'd like to read that law now, which forever enshrines the events of those years past, now long past. The agency has committed to improving agency culture and leadership. However, actions taken to date fall short of addressing the permissive environment for management abuses. End quote. They then went on to enumerate various remedial actions. You know, it's pretty sad, isn't it, when Congress has to tell you to fix your own agency and you still don't do it, so they have to write it into law, and then you probably don't follow it anyways.
Nope.
But that is the epilogue to this story, I think. Chad.
I will say that I tried to actually have the fact that I was a whistleblower included in my final fitness report when I was.
I love it.
That's so cool.
It's your duty.
And I was told that would not be a good career move for me, which I wear as a badge of honor. You know, I mean, that was one of the hardest things I've done in my career. And I think you should be giving out awards for that stuff, not Velvet Dagger fitness reports, which is what I got for the period of time that I did blow the whistle.
Sorry, Chad, for just a second, because that's an important takeaway. That was an element in your case, which was lack of advocacy. So you had a Marine colonel sitting in the Defense Intelligence Agency positioned, at least on paper, to be the services and service members' arguably advocate. Yours rolled over and played dead. My Air Force gelatinous blob who was sitting in the agency, when I approached him about the reprisal, he basically just placated the chain of command and didn't advocate for me. Cheska saw the same thing. The trend that I'm getting at here is that there still exists, I believe today, and especially there was at our time, this risk that when military members go into these intelligence community assignments, they're really left to their own devices without a lot of top cover, and surprisingly with a lot of regulatory loopholes that leave them susceptible to things like retaliation, discrimination, harassment, all of which we saw, Cheska included.
Well, I mean, there is no DoD policy anywhere, at least that I found when I was going through all my stuff. There is DoD policy to handle complaints within the service. So Army complaint, Army person goes Army policies. There's a policy for how to handle complaints in a joint environment, which means military and military. So if I have a complaint, I'm working with the Marines, then there's a way to do that. There is no DoD policy that I'm aware of that says if you are in an intelligence agency or an agency where you do not have like a Department of Army civilian, you just have a DoD civilian, which in our case, DIA civilians, those are not part of the services, there's no policy that exists for how to handle a complaint in that world, which is what the element commanders, Army element, Marine Corps, Air Force, whoever, that's the massive loophole that they rely on. And they say, well, we can't do anything to help at all. And then you go to DIA for help and they're like, oh, we can't do anything to help. And so then all your service members are just in this black hole of no one's there to help them. And that's not just a DIA problem, that's a National Geospatial Agency problem. That's all of the intel agencies where military members exist.
It's huge gap, huge gap. And I think the ultimate win here, really, it's kind of like the proverbial, how many crimes do the police prevent? We'll never know, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because we took a stand, I have no doubt we prevented future Ryan Swayze's, future Chad Brooks's, future Cheska Graham's from happening because certain people aren't in positions anymore, A, and B, I know for a fact we're still discussed at the agency. And that means, of course, we're being besmirched, I have no doubt, but also when new geographic division leads go, maybe I should order people to subvert the chain of command, I'll bet you they think twice nowadays. And in that is another win.
Yeah.
So that was a hell of a lot right there to cover because it was a hell of a lot going on in those 5 years. But we can talk about it today. And really, we talk about victories. I think for us, Chad, I'm going to speak on your behalf for a second. That's really the ultimate victory. The ability to come back psychologically and emotionally, discuss it, hell, even laugh a time or two as we did. That's really, for me, the sweetest victory. And we see this a lot in the clients we advise, too. It's, okay, we've got to get restitution. We've got to get redress. But first and foremost, you got to make sure you and your family are right, and you got to be right in your headspace in order to do that. And so the fact that we're all here today chuckling at DIA's expense, and rightfully so, it is a huge win just from a self-care standpoint. So my friend, and I call you that, I've lost a few friends along the way, and Jessica and I have talked about this, how you lose those in the path of the whistleblower. People cower, and I get it. There's collateral damage, but my friend, I'm glad and proud to call you a friend. I'm happy we could be on this show today talking about it, and you're coming forward and showing a lot of courage doing so. So thank you. Congrats, and I leave you the last word, amigo.
Thanks, Ryan. And that means a lot to me, man, because I'll tell you one thing, when you go through the whistleblower process, you're going to find out real quick who your friends are.
Yes.
Who aren't.
Yes.
And you're also going to find out even the ones that still say that they're your friend. You're going to find out the ones who really are courageous and willing to, be there, ride or die with you, and who aren't. And that's disappointing. Yeah. I mean, that was really disappointing to see who stuck by and who didn't. But, that's, hey, guess what? They gave you an opportunity to find people of better value to keep in your life,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's been a ride. And, personally, I'm in a much better place now. I think look, I'll just say it. I was traumatized. I mean, I had to reach out and get, help afterwards for a long time. And so, that's a win. But I also think that we've done a lot of good for the people that came after us. There's
Absolutely.
More oversight now. There's still a lot more to do. More oversight is needed. And hopefully that's something that we can, continue to do, because I don't want anybody out there feeling as alone as we were, I think we were the first ones through the wall, and the first ones through the wall always get bloodied up. So, yeah.
Yep. Amen. And so that ends the story, nay, the chapter regarding the Defense Attaché service scandal of 2019 to 2022. But I say not over because did the agency really learn anything? Or were they just eager to libel, slander, bury the witnesses, and move on? Likely the latter, based on precedent. And out of that concern, I'd like to close the show with an email I sent to the current director, Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz. Lieutenant General Cruz, by way of introduction, my name is Ryan Swayze. I have little doubt the name is unfamiliar, as is the slanderous narrative about me and my work to root out mission-impacting failures that were occurring in your agency during my attaché tenure and afterwards. Today, my Walk the Talk Foundation aired part one of a two-part podcast series entitled With Friends Like These, recounting the Defense Attaché service scandal of 2019 to 22 as it actually played out. As my colleague Lieutenant Colonel Chad Brooks and I recount our 4-year journey, our hope is that you and the agency's leaders will garner the important lesson we identified that your predecessor failed to grasp, which, on a holistic scale, is simple. When avenues of redress in the intelligence community fail, such as they did on numerous occasions at numerous levels in DIA during that time, i.e., the agency's military chain of command, senior service representatives, IG, EO, etc. When those fail, there are grave consequences. Operations are disrupted, careers are ruined, and lives are literally endangered. Thanks for your service. Respectfully, Ryan Swayze. See you next episode. Bye.
Well, that's it for this week's topic. We really appreciate you tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and check out our foundation website at walkthetalkfoundation.org.
And feel free to reach out and give us feedback. You can get a hold of us via Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, and our foundation's website. Details in the description section. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next episode.